And Mike, let's go and jump right into that right there. What Dave Canales said about Shaw Smith-Wade. Where have you seen Shaw Smith-Wade improve the most from last year, this year, and just really over the course of the summer?
Yeah, I just think he's very comfortable in his own skin. You hear him communicating. I mean, when I asked Dave that question, it was pertaining to a story I'm working on that'll be out Thursday, but there's a lot of buzz in that building, both on and off the record, about Shaw Smith-Wade. Like, of the guys that are getting built up internally, I think Shaw Smith-Wade is a guy that people are really excited about. And that's like a complete 180. Like, truthfully, last year he was very much on the bubble, even as a fifth-round pick, and now he's a guy that they don't think they just have two good outside corners. They feel like they have a great outside corner, a good outside corner, and a good nickel corner. And I think that's something that's been kind of lost in the sauce of this rework defense. And I think I've said it for months, they like their cornerback room much more than anybody else does. And, you know, that doesn't always work out, but Shaw Smith-Wade, at least in practice, is showing why that is.
That's Mike Kaye, Charlotte Observer, joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I remember talking with Shaw Smith-Wade at different points last year, and I think it was just him getting used to playing inside. I mean, how big is this for Dan Morgan in that front office to find a player that eventually did become a starter in the fifth round?
Well, you know, when he was at the Senior Bowl, a bunch of coaches and scouts told him that he was going to have to move to nickel because of his size, because most teams want bigger, longer corners these days. And I think, you know, the Panthers scouted him as both an outside and inside corner, and I think, you know, it just took him, it was a matter of time. This kid is known for his football IQ. I think if he can be a prominent guy, you know, the sky's the limits for him. Nickel corner is one of the more involved spots on the defense. You have to play the run well, you have to blitz well, you have to cover well. You basically have to do everything. And I think they trust him to do things well because he has that experience on the outside. He has that experience now on the inside. And, you know, in the span of 16 or so months, he has become a very confident nickel corner.
There are a lot of questions, as you mentioned, after you get past the two outside corners with J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson and Shaw Smith-Wade as a slot corner. There are a lot of questions in the secondary, at least from our end of things. I know Shamar Bartholomew is a guy that's getting a lot of reps, but who has stood out to you on the roster outside of that starting group that can push for a roster spot this year?
Well, Bartholomew has had a couple of picks during the offseason program, and he had one today. But really, there's a guy who was undrafted, Corey Thornton, who's really impressed me. He's getting pretty strong reps. JC and Mike Jackson both were off today, and Thornton got plenty of play. I think he's a big physical corner. He kind of makes sense as a long-term immediate backup for JC and Mike Jackson. I think Bartholomew is probably better off in nickel and probably packaged outside corner stuffs. But Caleb Evans is a guy they liked coming in. I just think Thornton and Bartholomew have easily outplayed him thus far. But we'll see. I mean, again, I think they're going to keep their options open there, but they really like this cornerback group.
Any chance they go outside the roster to add to that position?
I think maybe after the Browns joint practices, they had a workout yesterday with a DB, and they had a couple of guys in last week. But right now, I think they want – here's the thing. If you have a bunch of inexperienced guys, you want to get them the reps, because if you bring in a guy to be like the main backup or the top nickel or whatever, those other guys aren't getting reps. And so if that player that you brought in doesn't live up to par or gets injured, those guys aren't prepared. So you want to stockpile reps for these younger guys so they can develop, instead of doing what they did last year with Shaw Smith-Wade, where he had to wait till basically like week 12 to get some quality experience. And I think that's a new philosophy this year. They want to get these young kids as many reps as possible, not just at corner, but in other spots as well.
Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Dennis Cox sitting in for Adam Gold this afternoon. Let's turn focus over here to the other side of the ball in the wide receiver group. There's been a lot of buzz about Hunter Renfrow. How difficult is Hunter Renfrow making it on Dave Canales and Dan Morgan in terms of who they keep at wide receiver?
I mean, if if they have to make final cuts, let's say tomorrow, Hunter Renfrow's on this roster. Like, they're going to have to find a way. He started to take punt returns just because, if they keep 5 or 6, 4 through 5 or 4 through 6 need to be special teams valuable. And I think, I had high hopes for Dan Tazina, who was cut today. He'd been nursing a calf injury, got an injury settlement. And so I think that thins out the herd, so to speak. And I think, Hunter Renfrow is going to get some legit playing time if he keeps playing this way. Like, if he goes into the preseason and does what he's been doing in practice, like, I don't know how you keep that guy off the field, even with Adam Thielen there. I mean, if anything, I wonder about Jalen Coker's spot in the rotation, because really Coker should be the heir apparent to Thielen, but Hunter Renfrow is making it impossible not to keep him on the field. So it's an interesting dynamic right now.
If they keep 6 wide receivers, who do you think's the odd man out? Is it David Moore?
It depends. I mean, I could see a contender coming by and being like, hey, we'll give you a 5th for Adam Thielen. And, I mean, you might be hard-pressed to say no if you even Hunter and think he can be a starting slot receiver. I mean, Jimmy Horn has looked very, very good without pads. I didn't notice him at all yesterday when they had pads on. So I'm interested to see how he does in the preseason. There's always injuries. But David Moore makes sense because he's a vested veteran, so he's not subject to waivers. He also would have his full contract guaranteed as a vested veteran if he's on the week 1 roster. What you could do in theory with the new practice squad rules stemming from COVID, you could place him on the practice squad for a week, make waiver claims, do whatever you need to do, and then bring him back week 2 and put him on the main roster. Like, he is a guy that only really wants to play for Dave Canales, and so I think sometimes you have to kind of take advantage of that with roster construction. Any
chance or any scenario where they just go ahead and keep 7 wide receivers on the initial 53? Is there a chance that happens?
I mean, if the depth on the defense is terrible, sure, I guess. I mean, look, David Moore can play special teams. We know that. He can return, he can gun, he can do a lot of things. And he is very valuable internally. He's the guy that was brought in to bring along Coker and Legette last year. He's doing the same thing with McMillan and Horn this year. I think he means a lot to their program, and I would kind of be stunned if he wasn't at the very least on the practice squad this year.
Mike Kaye, Charlotte Observer, joining us here. You mentioned a couple of those young wide receivers, and Tepper, McMillan, and Xavier Legette. From let's start with Xavier Legette, the second-year player first. From what I saw so far in the days that I've been able to get down to, whether minicamp back in June or training camp last week, it just seems like he's healthier with having the procedure on his foot. He just seems a little bit more confident. What have you seen from Xavier Legette so far in camp in this offseason?
He's running with a lot of power. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in the middle of the field when Xavier Legette runs a crossing route.
No, I don't want to be.
I'm not going to be able to bring him. But yeah. I mean, he is like a locomotive as a runner, and I think being used the Z position benefits him. I think they had hopes of making him an X receiver, but it was very clear during the second half of the season he lost like almost all of his explosion and his concentration, and it just like, I think he needs to be off press. He needs to be able to be used in motion. His best route is a slant, and I think he's going to be deadly this year, especially if McMillan can take off the top of the defense and they can do some things at the X position, at the slot position to free him up a bit.
Speaking of McMillan, the catch radius and everything that was talked about him pre-draft, it's a real thing, and it seems like Dave Canales and Bryce Young have something that they just didn't really have last year, just that rangy wide receiver that can win 50-50 contested catches. We even saw it a couple days ago where he had that one-on-one rep against Mike Jackson and pulled down a tough catch on a great ball by Bryce Young. How much does the skill set of Tepper and McMillan just add a different element to this offense?
Well, I think he got off to a bit of a slow start. I think some of his inexperience kind of showed. Going up against J.C. Horn those first few days. But I think, like you said, like if the ball hits his hands, it's going to be caught. And I think that in itself is a cheat code. Now, what I'd like to see is him make some plays on balls that aren't particularly accurate. Because, like I always call A.J. Brown a kingmaker. He's a QB maker. You throw in his general direction, he's probably going to come down with it 9 out of 10 times and make you look better for passing it. I think that's where we need to see McMillan kind of develop. But as of right now, he's kind of going with the flow and doing his thing. And I think he's going to bring a lot of energy to this offense. I also think he is a guy who has some pretty subtle speed. Like yesterday, he caught a crossing route. He broke free very easily, by the way, in 11-on-11s, just streaked across the field. Young hit him in stride, and he basically ran off of what would have been a 45-yard touchdown. So, like, the understated speed's there. I think he's got Gumby-like bend and movement ability, which is good in open space. I think they feel really good about him.
All right, final question for Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer. Again, check out the Charlotte Observer. Also, you can follow him on social media at Mike_E_K, Kaye. A final thing, let's go ahead and get actually to the rookies on the defensive side of the ball with Nick Scorton and Princely Umamielen. We've seen the flashes actually early on come from Umamielen, and the speed in which he has used so far in training camp is something we saw in college. Where have you seen the growth of these two so far from the summer, and what effect they can have so far in their rookie seasons on the defense?
What I kind of like about them is they complement each other so well.
Yep.
So, like, Scorton is more of, like, your classic strong side edge rusher, where he's going to collapse on a tight end. He's going to collapse on a left tackle. He's going to make it a problem. Today, he showed some pass rushing chops against Ikwanu and Mitchell Evans. I think he's going to immediately be an upgrade from a run defense perspective, even over potentially Jadeveon Clowney. And then I think, Princely, he's going to win with his speed and his bend, and that was advantageous for him in the early days of no pads, because if you can win around the corners, offensive linemen can barely touch you because it's a limited contract drill. I'm interested to see what happens, because when they played the Browns and the Texans in joint practices, and they have to line up and go one-on-one against a guy who you haven't seen every single day and knows his tricks, I'm interested to see how both those guys kind of turn out. They're both from Texas, so I'm sure that Houston joint practice is going to be kind of interesting.
Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer. Check out his work there. He does a phenomenal job covering the team. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.